Wir heißen euch willkommen zu den ersten im Zyklus Tamistad, zu den ersten von den Events, die folgen werden in den nächsten 2 Monaten. Das Projekt Tamistad fokussiert auf die Literatur, die außerhalb Österreichs herausgegeben wurde, aber doch einen Bezug auf Menschen und ihre Lebenswelten in Österreich hat. Das Projekt wird durch 4 Zyklen wie folgt gekennzeichnet. Der Zyklus Ne-Nomad, Nomad und Nomad-Ne-Nomad fanden schon statt. Und heute der dedizierte Fokus im 4. Zyklus Niemandsland ist den Autoren und Autorinnen aus Bosnien und Herzegowina gewidmet. Dieser Zyklus steht jenseits der 3 oben erwähnten Zyklen und ist dennoch mit ihnen verbunden und von ihnen durchgedrungen. Das Projekt Tamistad ist eine Fortsetzung bzw. Weiterentwicklung der vorherigen literarischen Projekte, die Tirams, und wird in der Zeitspanne von Oktober 21 bis Dezember 23 durchgeführt. Die Projektidee enthält die Lesungen als einen wichtigen performativen Projektteil, wird aber auch durch die geplanten Artist Talks erweitert. Ich erwähne auch mal, wann die nächsten Events sind. Am 30. Oktober kommt die Purić, am 27. November Anita Pajević, 4. Dezember Nihat Hasanović und 11. Dezember Selma Asotic. Und heute darf ich vorstellen Dinko Kreho.
Tschüss.
Dinko Kreho. Oh, now we're in English. So this is gonna be a trilingual event just for fun, because why not? Dinko Kreho writes short fiction, poetry, creative non-fiction, and literary criticism. He was born in Sarajevo in 1986. After attending primary and secondary education in Bihać, Zagreb, Pariz and Rennes, he then graduated in comparative literature and South Slavic literature at the University of Sarajevo. He lives in Zagreb. He is the author of 6 books, the most recent of which is the short story collection Odmor od kulture, A Break from Culture, published in summer 21 by Durieux. He also translates from French and performs with the Zagreb-based collective Centar for the Theatre of the Oppressed, Centar za kazalište, potlačenih, POKAZ. Kreho's work has appeared in English, French, Greek, Estonian, Slovenian, and German translation. It has been awarded a number of literary prizes and awards in Croatia as well as in the other ex-Yugoslav countries. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Great to be here. I'm saying here because earlier we had a discussion about the exact name of this place. Mm-hmm. Because there are like 4 institutions in this small space.
And we stand corrected.
Let's keep it at here, or should it?
Here, just
here.
Here.
Hi.
Also, there's another person here, hard to miss, Mirza Purić. Mirza Purić is a literary translator, most recently of Faruk Šehić's Under Pressure by Istra's Books in 2019. And in co-translation with Ellen Elias Bursac of Miljenko Jergović Inshallah, Madonna Inshallah, forthcoming by Archipelago Books. His work has appeared in Agni, Asymptote, Literary Hub, Europe Now, HOW, and elsewhere. Welcome, Mirza.
Thank you, Anja.
So, having said that, I think you would like to...
I think Mirza is going to just give us a crash course introduction, and then I'll...
Please.
Because I'm more of a host here tonight rather than a guest. So we've heard
co-host.
Co-host, sorry. We've heard about Dinko. So I'd like to start us off with some very basic and broad sketch of who we are. When I say we, I mean the people from the Balkans region who do literature. And in order to understand who we are and how we do what we do, and to understand our poetics and ethics and aesthetics and everything, I thought it would be useful to say a few words about the environment in which we sort of start off. Dinko wrote an excellent essay about it, about his beginnings in this. And by way of digression, the world of literature, the world of publishing is never easy to explain to people who are, stand outside of that. And I mostly publish in the UK, in the US, and elsewhere. I don't publish in Bosnia, where I live. And I've seen quite a lot of things, but nothing that can be even remotely compared to the madness of the publishing scene in Sarajevo. It's light speed insane. And it's really difficult for a young person to sort of to crack open the door and get a foot in. Dinko wrote an essay about it, which I liked very much. I set out to translate it. I was unable to finish it, but we have the first paragraph, the introductory paragraph of the essay. And who's going to read it? Because I'm terrible at reading.
Thank you.
There you go.
So I'm going to read this one just in English. Later we're going to read in Bosnian or Serbo-Croatian or Central South Slavic, and also in German.
Old Church Slavonic.
All translations are by Mirza, hereby present.
Except that one. Never mind. Okay, I'll take credit for that too. No worries.
In one of my previous lives, I yearned for a place of distinction in the literary and cultural life of the milieu in which I lived and studied literature. I orbited my poems, stories, critical pieces, and political analysis in hand around a group of men whom I looked up to as masters of the written word, ethically and aesthetically superior to the backwater in which they operated. I attended book presentations, public forums, and literary soirees where they gathered, and I patronized the boozers. They patronized, convinced that it was in these places, public forums and boozers alike, that true artistic and literary values, as well as critical thought and democracy as such, were defended. Every time one of the grey heads was up to no good, and there was some proper swinery, I would pull a convenient rationalization out of my sleeve. In return, I was wined and dined and praised as a promising young lad. These commendations made me feel that I was getting closer not only to the realization of my supposed literary potentials, but also to the attainment of full membership in the world of grown, thinking men. In short, I was a young writer.
How did that work out?
Terribly. It was awful.
Go ahead, man.
I had to make a 10-year break from writing poetry and fiction, from even trying to publish books. I wrote in other genres. I mean, I wrote in journalism. I wrote for journals, for websites, for stuff like that. But I wrote almost no poetry or fiction of any kind, stories. I threw everything from, let's say, 2009 to, let's say, 2017.
And it's quite a high.
Well, no, 2019. It was like 8 years. There were some attempts, but my self-image and self-confidence was nowhere near where. I mean, I only now I can see how bad it was. I couldn't really put it together. Yes. And actually, it was writing this essay and this whole book because there's a non-fiction collection that's named after this essay, and many of the essays and pieces therein talk about this sort of matter.
One.
Yeah, the only exemplary here.
Oh, no, I have another one.
Wow, sorry, I'm sorry. Thank you. So actually, I think writing this essay and some other pieces that are now in these collections, that it has been a process that has in a way allowed me to wrap up this period that lasted way longer than I thought. I thought I was over it, but actually I was suffering the consequences for years of being a young writer. And promising, emerging, however you want to put it.
You went into rehab for young writers?
Yes, but I wasn't even... I thought I was over it. I thought that was the rehab. But after writing this essay and some other stuff, it was like it came together. Only then I felt, I had wrapped it up and I could really start writing.
Move on.
I could start writing, not trying to be a writer. Not trying to write what I think other people think I should write, just write. Yeah. And that's why I sort of went into a streak and like these other 3 books that are, these other 3 books that are here, or even 4 with this one are published like in the span of 2 years and a half. It's not because I'm a scribomaniac, It's just because something started working out only then.
Excellent. So it was a traumatizing experience in a way.
It was completely normalized, it was completely normalized at the time.
The trauma was normalized.
It was completely normalized. It's like you had to hang out around certain people, be pretty much, of a scumbag as a person, or try to be.
Mm-hmm.
And here, I'm not, it's not like I came here to just say, oh, it was like utter shit, and, I wrote about this, and it's not, this essay and these things we are talking about now, it's not like a breakup piece, I'm leaving this behind. Every literary scene is like, no literary scene is monolithic, homogeneous. They're all different.
It's a product of a process.
Yes, it's more of a process than. In fact, when a literary scene starts seeing itself as a scene, as a commodity, as something fixed, that's when issues arise. But there were some really, and there still are some really problematic trends. Not only in Bosnia, but let's focus on the Bosnian scene because it's the topic of this conversation and of this program. So in that sense, it was some very problematic practices were normalized and encouraged, not only normalized, but encouraged.
Excellent. Well, not really, but
It's sort of shitty.
It's like so many of us, this series of events, as Anja mentioned, we have this like common theme, recurring theme of nomadism and versus fixity, spatial like fixity, and how that affects people's poetics and approach to writing. It's amazing how many of us became kind of language refugees. I translate like 99% of the stuff that I put out in English. Like Selma, who we will host here in December, she writes bilingually, she writes everything, in both languages at the same time, Others are, like yourself, you live in Zagreb now, you stayed in the same language, but you sort of removed yourself from Sarajevo, it's no longer, it's going too dispersed to be even considered any kind of scene. It's amazing. Do we have anything in common left? Because we're not in the same place anymore. Very, very few of us.
Well, that's one thing in common. That's one thing in common. This displacement or dislocation, maybe. I don't know. It's really.
We will return to that.
It's really hard to explain in my experience, to people who come from like big languages in European terms, at least like German or French or English, which I was speaking now. Because like when you come from a small language, and now when I say a language, I mean everything that's spoken in Bosnia, Serbia, Croatia, and Montenegro. Like when you come from a small language, like the mechanics and the process of entering literature or the literary field or making a name for yourself are completely different compared to bigger languages, bigger literary fields. It just like it's so claustrophobic, so many people whose work you read, you also bump into them all the time. They bump into you. You have the impression all of your readers sometimes, although you don't. That's an illusion. Things can be very surprising in that regard. When you stumble upon your work or mentions of your work, in some completely unexpected places. So I'm aware that this is an illusion. You don't really know everybody, and it's not really that small. We tend to focus just on some tiny, part of this literary or artistic field that we would consider mainstream, whatever that might mean in a country like Bosnia or Croatia, and then think that's it. But a lot more people read than we think, in my experience at least. But this illusion that everybody, that it's so small, that it's sort of suffocating, is very strong, because more often than not, these relationships around you, in this literary milieu, are to use a trendy term, toxic.
Toxic, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well. Let's move on to your. Was that after Lali pieces, taking a break from culture, Odmor od kulture?
Would you translate it? Sorry. Just a bit of an off topic. Would you translate it differently? I said break from culture, rest from culture.
Taking a break from culture, but that's just off the cuff. That's not how it works.
Again.
It's the first thing that came to mind, but it doesn't matter. Anja, could we hear the excerpt from one of the stories?
It's a short story collection. It's just to say a few words. It's the latest published book of these four here. Oh, okay. Yes. It came out a few months ago, in fact, with Zagreb-based editor Durieux, and it's a collection of short stories. And yes, we have prepared an excerpt from one of them to read.
And it's not my work, okay? The translation.
It's
the rest
Halifax translation. Halifax translation.
Yeah, it's an agency translation. That's not how literature is supposed to be translated. If you
I think it's pretty good, I have to say.
I think it is, but there is no name on it, mate. I'm responsible for everything I put out.
There are names, but I can't recall it now because it's a question of who you know. I don't know the feel. There it was published on the website of the Crocodile Association from Belgrade. They're like an NGO which organizes cultural events and stuff. And on their site you can read Halifax translations / the names of 2 people. But sorry, they evade me right now. I'm sorry.
Okay, so who do we sue? For libel or whatever?
If they don't like it.
Yeah.
If you don't like anything, if there's anything you don't like about this conversation, about me, about the works, you can intervene. But we'll save that for later. And don't run away. It's not a poetic performance. I'm not going to be doing anything to you. No.
So I'm going to read the 5th paragraph, the end of this short story. So, we were prepared for all kinds of outcomes and plot twists, but we did not expect that after such a frenetic and almost sleepless night in the van, all 4 of us would be so full of energy. It is possible that Deacon, Sonia and I will simply high on serotonin, having expeditiously planned and successfully carried out the treatment. As for Schmidt, it could have been a side effect or the result of the treatment. In any case, that sunny May morning on the terrace of the garden, he was glowing like a man reborn. When it was time to pay the bill, Schmidt mimed to us to stay clear. "It's the least I can do for you," he said, handing out quite a substantial tip too. "Schmidt," Dinko giggled, "will have to think of a tamer nickname. You've been Schmidt to us for such a long time that I sometimes forget your real name." "O tempora amores," Schmidt exclaimed, puffing out his chest theatrically. "Hola, professor," someone shouted over the hubbub. We all turned. A beautiful, dark-skinned woman in a navy blue dress, our age or even younger, was navigating between the sun umbrellas and tables. "I thought I was the only one late, but look, so is our keynote speaker," she laughed. Schmidt was about to reply, but before he could do it, we heard another voice behind us. "Perhaps I was waiting for you." We nearly fell off our chairs. The voice was definitely Schmidt's. A fraction of a second later, Schmidt actually appeared in our line of vision. Unlike the one sitting with us, his hair was neatly combed and his shirt was ironed. He and the woman met next to our table, hugged and kissed each other cordially. "I just hope they heat up the coffee properly this time," he said, to which she burst out laughing. Bewildered, we started miming to our Schmidt. He opened his mouth a few times like a fish on dry land. "Oh no," he finally uttered weakly. "They've activated the backup." He did not seem any less gobsmacked than we were. The second, or was it the first, Schmidt and his colleague headed towards the exit. As they were leaving, he threw a quick glance back, but it was long enough for us to make no mistake. He was laughing at us.
Thanks, Anja. I love your cartoon villain accent with Schmidt. I think it works good, even if it's a bit out of context, because it's in fact the last part, and now the story is spoiled for everybody. But no worries. You'll forget about it soon enough. Thanks.
So anyways,
You were saying?
Yeah, well, can you give us, I mean, we've heard a bit, can you tell us what the story is about and,
This concrete story?
Yeah,
the
this
collection?
specific one, or if you want to talk about other stories as
okay,
well. No problem.
I think most stories in the book are about some sort of defeat, about people trying to drastically change something with a set of means they have in a given moment, which seems to them like it gives them some agency. Be it superpowers, is in one of the stories, there's actually a superhero story, but in there, be it some weird steampunk technology, like in this story, like they all have some stuff maybe they feel like they can change something. Either a war from breaking out in one of the stories, or they can just get a revenge on some guy who's really being an asshole, who they longed for a long time, who's like a guy who's passing himself for a leftist, university professor, very but who in fact has like a very problematic past and nobody cares about because he's really charming and well spoken. It's in this story. So, but I think what I was saying, it's common to all stories, is like some sort of attempt at, challenging the system and failing. It's like the worst cliche, but it's how I personally sum it up. I don't know.
Cool, excellent. At the end of the book, you have a bit of a foreword about the stories, and you put out two interesting ideas there. Namely, I can't write without deadline anxiety. Why?
Oh, I can't.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Absolutely can't.
Fact. It's a fact.
I had to.
Why can't you just, wake up like a normal person, have a cup of coffee,
Go to work.
go to work?
Go to work. I can do that very well. I can organize my routine pretty good for someone who's on the autistic spectrum, such as myself. I think I'm not bad, or actually, it is a characteristic of the spectrum. Rather, I'm not sure. And let's not get into let's not digress too much into the diagnosis. But I can do that when I have a deadline. I need a deadline. It sort of puts a clear, concrete date and task I have to complete until the given date. And yeah, all these stories have sort of been written with a looming deadline, and I think it shows in some of them. Like, I've worked on all of them, but some of them I think they could have used like a more relaxed approach. But I think it also allowed me to came up with some stuff I maybe wouldn't have come up with, just like if I just woke up and sat in front of my computer and let's think of something. Sometimes it was really frenetic. Like, I have 3 days to send this story for this short story competition. I need something good. Okay. There are all ideas I've had before. It's not like I come up with I have some notes. But it's very broad. It's very unspecified.
And it had been brewing for a while.
Yeah, but not really in an active way. More of before going to sleep, I think of something. Okay. And then sometimes I remember it. Sometimes I don't. In the actual construction of the story, I have 3 days for sending, for instance, this story, and I don't really care about competitions, prizes, and stuff. But it allows me to have a clear task, goal, date, deadline, and yeah. So I start neurotically thinking about it. I need to think of something. I need to think of a plot twist. I need to think of and I think I also came up with some stuff I wouldn't have come out of desperation. Maybe what can I do? Let's make it as the literal backup of this villain appears, because he just reduplicated himself and he can endlessly just make clones of himself, which can be interpreted, I don't know, literally or metaphorically, figuratively. He just spreads his influence, his web. So yeah.
I'm asking, of course, because I'm in a way like that. But,
oh, no kidding.
But the moment I sign the contract, the moment the deadline, the countdown starts, I have plenty of time. That's where I start working myself up into a psychosis, and that's how I work. I just wanted to see how it works with you, because I never finished stuff, like 3 days before the deadline. I get into that sort of mode like immediately.
I think it's interesting what you said. You get into this panic mood in which you then produce.
It's the worst case, but it's not always panic. But
because there's also the other way, just the pressure makes it clear what you have to do, makes the path clearer, and makes the way optionized. Just like the best way you can take in that moment, or the only one, because the time is.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's healthy. But it's this circle of adrenaline that you get your adrenaline release. No, 3 days was okay, it was a bit of an exaggeration, but a lot of these deadlines, in the Serbian, Bosnian, Montenegrin, Croatian speaking, Central South Slavic, speaking,
Old Church Slavonic,
area, linguistic field or area, there is tons of competitions for short stories, and now I'm probably reaching into your second question.
Yeah, that was my second question, but go on. No,
I wanted to say that there's a ton of that stuff, and more often than not, it's seen as an opportunity to, you write a story, and you write a couple of these stories, you get you get your name out there, you get noticed, and then you either collect the stories somewhere or you write a novel. But the short story is seen as a foreplay to writing a novel, which I'm not very keen. I love short stories, and but it's why there is a lot of these deadlines. And they're often quite short. It's not like there's a year or like 18 months or something. Sometimes with the book contract it has to be completed within 12 months or 18 months. Like here it's more like 3 weeks. So the 3 days thing was an exaggeration.
Okay, obviously, yeah. But can we just quickly go back to that? Why is it so? Why do you have to suffer for? I mean, I'd assumed. I mean, the same. I'd assumed that it was some kind of a corollary of this culture of burnout romanticization. Romanticization. Like, look how hard I've been working. Look how little I've slept. Look how little I got paid for this. Look how much I love my job. Look how I'm destroying myself. To produce this bollocks. I thought it was kind of related. That we sort of got suckered into that without even knowing.
It is related, and a lot of people in the literary scene. I mean, they keep on repeating this, like writing is work as well, culture and art, it's work. And I get why they are saying that.
It's kind of overcompensation.
Yes, and I get, in a practical way, I get why people are so fixated on that, to get a better position, better, better working conditions, money, insurance, stuff like that. I get why people are insisting on that. But the downside of that is that it's this romanticization of overwork, of precariousness, which becomes a buzzword, And a lot of concepts, when discussing the material conditions of writing and when discussing writings, lots of concepts like really became buzzwords, such as precariousness, not getting paid, getting, like burning out, and stuff about writing being work, which I mean, yeah, I agree, yeah, but it's become buzzwords and sort of also passwords to some sort of vertical mobility,
Look at this guy's collection of serotonin reuptake inhibitors. He has got something going on. Let's give him another contract.
And it becomes like just like an end to itself, and it becomes like just like some, I don't know, conservative nationalist circles in the literary scene have their own discourse, they have their own communication, their own way of recruiting people now, and some sort of this, let's say it very, very broadly, some sort of literary left in the post-Yugoslav.
Let's call it
Glad
that.
to make you laugh. But some sort of literary left has adopted this discourse of look how poor I am, look how precarious. But it also becomes an end to itself, and also just serves to, some tiny privileges, some small degree of vertical mobility, vertical ascensions, some, like grabbing some money here and there. I mean, it becomes an end to itself more often than not. Yeah, and I'm not saying I'm exempt from it. I'm not saying I'm above that.
Of course.
Yeah. But I'm not. I want to go as far as to say, I burned and crashed writing this book, as my editor who worked with me on this manuscript, Ivana Rogar, can confirm. I wasn't like, I have to complete this, I'm dying over this. I was more like, okay, I think I've got this. The meme where the dog where everything is burning, it's fine. No, I really think it was okay. It was, I mean, we took a very relaxed approach. She had quite a lot of comments, interventions in the stories, but after I finished the first draft, I let it just, stay for a couple of months, I think.
Draw time.
Yeah, draw time, and then I came back to it, and I reworked some stuff. I accepted some of her ideas, some not really. Sometimes we found a compromise. So in the end, it wasn't that stressful of an experience. Yeah.
Excellent. And you mentioned earlier about these competitions, like literary contests for short stories. You said in the foreword, afterward, you said something like, the reason the short story as a genre, as a form, still survives is because you have all these contests. You know. Is it really that bad? Because I was, when we were preparing for this, I was on Zoom with Lejla Kalamuić, who was here in 2 weeks, and we brought that up with Goran. And Lejla and I, we didn't think that, at least in the Balkans, we didn't think that the short story was somehow subordinate to the novel. I mean, people buy that stuff, people write that stuff, people read that stuff, to the best of my knowledge. And you seem to disagree.
Yeah, it's a bit of an exaggeration. When I said the only reason it survives, I did mean from the subjective viewpoint of the authors, and even not only from the subjective viewpoint of the people who publish this. These sort of collections, and Lejla Kalamuić herself has a great short story collection which was quite successful. Even two, but the first one is not that well known. The second one was really like
the translation is doing really well in the US.
Cool. So I was taking more of from a, let's say, impersonal, systemic point of view. Like, I really think, in that sense, there's a literary field and the cultural field, which, to a degree, it's a product of the will of its own actors, of the writers, publishers, critics, translators, everybody involved. But to a certain degree, it is not. Like, it's a system. It has some systemic logic of its own. So, in that sense, I think the short story survives on this sort of competition, and like this, Lejla herself has been awarded a number of literary awards and
prizes.
Yeah, in many cases, I'm very happy she could get these awards instead of some other stories that I don't think. I would rather her stories, not her. Yeah, we have to differentiate it also to a degree, instead of some other stories that I would maybe think would be a safer bet. But yeah, I think there is a sort of a rise of the short story this last few years, but it's seen, I don't know, it's seen as a, more often than not, I'd say, as an activist medium, to say some things very quickly, to like show some social situation or something, like I don't know. I was really interested into exploring, the possibilities of the short story, and the feedback was the feedback. I mean, in the press, the critical feed, if we can really call. But yes, there is some. I don't have such a catastrophic view. There is some literary criticism. There are some media. There is some magazines and websites. So yeah, from the point of view of a critical feedback, there were lots of pieces arguing that you had to really be a hardcore fan of genre, because it's mostly non-realistic stories, like either some science fiction, slipstream, weird fiction, or stuff like that, or really open-minded towards experimental literature. But these stories are not really that experimental at all. Like, for instance, there is a story written in epistolary form, like an 18th century thing, not really new, not really revolutionary. Yeah, it is a science fiction story, but even that's not new. Like, even with us, when you read the science fiction, I don't know, magazine series from the 70s or the 80s, the Yugoslav science fiction, there were stories like that, and much more radical in the form. But I think it's a symptom of how we came to view the short story, as something very based on just a couple of, features, very reductive view of the short story. In fact, that it's mostly realistic. If it's not realistic, like if it has, I don't know, fantastic or science fiction elements, it has to serve as an allegory for something. It has to be like a statement. It has to relate something in real life. It has to be like to speak about some social issues, some social. I think that's the dominant view of the short story. And sorry, just one, because now I remembered, I also could answer a bit more to your question. The reason why I said the short story thrives on this, and that it still survives thanks to these competitions. Also, I had in mind the material conditions, like the social, the social situation and everything, socioeconomic. The short story is short, as the name says. It's incomparably cheaper to publish and to promote than a novel. You can launch an author with a short story much easier than you don't have to. Novels you can. But even that's a fifth of this story Anja has read, Treatment for Schmidt. You can get a pretty good idea what it is about. Like, unlike if we're, like compared to a novel, so I meant in that sense as well. It's cheaper for all the actors to produce it, distribute.
But this idea that the novel reigns supreme, and like 10 years ago there was talk of short story as the genre. It was on its way out. But that's completely counterintuitive to me, don't you think? I mean, we live insanely fast lives with the attention spans of goldfish. And wouldn't a short form lend itself much better to such, to a culture like that than a novel, which requires commitment. You don't read a novel, you don't just skim through it.
Yes, but you can advertise it, but you can skim through it and then advertise it. You can. I think even in small literary fields such as ours, we downplay this appeal of advertisement, of like this how you spin something, how you present something. I don't know. I think this like mythical force or aura of the novel is a lot stronger than the actual novels. And it's not that novels are maybe more read. It's just that a novel is it's a fetishism akin to the fetishism of the book itself. I mean, the form of the print of the book in print survives because of some sort of fetishism of the book as object. I mean, I'm a big book sniffer. Yeah, that's one of the reasons it thrives. And within the book market, if not that's not too pompous a name, this idea of the novel, of the big story, I know a lot of short story collections or novella collections that have been forcibly made into novels, even butchered by editors and publishers in order to be published and like presented and advertised as novels that would be a lot better off.
Fragmentary novel is the latest buzzword. Is it fragmentary novel? It's fragmentary.
Yes.
When you hear fragmentary novel, that's a collection of short stories that have been hammered into a novel.
Or not even that. Sometimes it's just like writing, a lot of writing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, I know some cases of really writers who were like, I'm publishing this, when you follow them on social media, you see like they're advertising this story collection they've been working on or novella collection they've been working on. And then all of a sudden you hear, oh, this and this has published a novel, and you see these people with this discourse, oh, this is my new novel, this is a great novel, this is everybody advertising it that way. So I don't think it's that, I think it's based on practicality I mean, your argument makes perfect sense that people have argued that like poetry has much more of a chance now because you can smuggle a line or two or a verse much more easily. You can tweet it. You can like you can't really do with novels. But I think it's not rational from a rational standpoint, from a practical standpoint. It makes sense, but from you have to mix in this ideology
Capitalism.
of the yes, and this ideology of the novel, and even with this huge trend of the so-called autofiction of writing and of everything, trying to squeeze everything into autobiographical narratives. I mean, there is some great stuff, but there is also some like I don't know, like. Shall we get into names?
By all means, man.
No, there's a great writer from Croatia whose name is Nenad Stipanić, and this guy really happens to love like bizarre fiction, weird fiction, and he's really very well read in those genres, and but he wrote a story collection which was quite successful, which was like semi-autobiographical, where he wrote about the Balkans underworld. And he couldn't get out of that for 10 years. Everything he tried to write in the genres that he wanted to write, like everybody kept pushing it, write about yourself, write about your experiences, write about your, and they like kept pushing him back. And it's only 2 years ago, I think it was, he published a really great novel, and it is a novel, called Bogovi Neona, Gods of Neon. But it was really a struggle for him because everybody was like, write about your life, not write novels. And for example, he had this short story collection, like about the underworld and everything. And I don't know the behind the scenes. I can say they forced him to rework into a novel, but there was some pressure for him to rework it in a novel in order to be awarded some prizes, let's say. It turned out good. It wasn't butchered, but like for years and years after that, he was like, write about yourself. Everybody around him was like, write about yourself. He was like, I really want to write some, some about like cosmic horrors and shape-shifting aliens and, the Earth 15,000 years from now and waking up in an afterlife in the Christ and leading a struggle against Earth that is ruled by a post-human artificial intelligence. 2 billion years in the future, that's the stuff he likes and stuff he's good at. But yeah.
But no, we want to hear about you, digging up potatoes.
Yes, and I think this pressure to write about your life, to write about your experiences, and your experiences are seen as a very, very narrow in that sense,
because that's authentic,
your experience, and my experience in that sense would be like, personally. What I got most feedback on was like some essays where I mixed in some autobiographical stuff, such as the one we read a paragraph from, but also, when I wrote about the war, my childhood, like people are going crazy for that. People are, in Bosnia and Croatia, but abroad as
Political
well.
aspects, because of the political aspects?
Because of the personal, first and foremost. But there is some trauma that is like this lurking between the lines, and, people like that. But yeah.
I suspect it kind of validates other people's experiences in some strange way. I don't know, I'm not a psychologist, obviously. This is a half-baked thought, but is there anything to it?
I don't know. I wouldn't dare, it's not a local phenomenon, and I wouldn't dare speak, just because you asked me about my thesis about the supremacy of the novel, I thought this was in some way also because I don't think the supremacy of the novel can also be distinguished from this supremacy of this realist of realism, let's say, of this imperative of authenticity. Yes, it's not that clear in my head either, but it's connected in a way.
Oh well, if short stories don't fare all that well, what's to say about poetry?
What to say about poetry?
I read somewhere somebody was really angry and they tweeted or something. People keep saying nobody reads poetry. Bullshit. I am somebody and I read poetry.
That's not bad. Yeah, poetry has always been on the margins. I don't think, I mean, it was certainly better in some historical periods in the sense of the working conditions, people who write poetry, the living conditions, what you could make from writing, publishing poetry, although I never think it was really a fortune. I wouldn't really idolize poetry in a sense. It's always, you know, like on the margins. And I speak as, you know, like, I do have a bit of research to back that up in the sense that, you know, I'm almost like trying to ask myself about these commonplaces you hear, like, today nobody reads poetry. Is it really that nobody reads it, or there's somebody who reads it? Or, and on the other hand, is that only today, I mean, there was, throughout the 20th century, you can see this discourse that nobody reads poetry. Just like you can see the discourse on that there is no literary criticism. I think the idea that we lack literary criticism and that nobody writes literary criticism anymore is as old as the notion of literary criticism in the modern sense. Yeah, and as for poetry, the discourse that poetry is being marginalized, it's sort of, I don't know, is being used to sort of try to push poetry onto social networks into, you know, some. It has benefited most definitely what you said about living fast, the need to say some things loud and clear and concisely. It has benefited from social networks. It is a bit of a commonplace, but I believe that is the case. Mm-hmm. Like people publishing on their, you know, tweeting, publishing on Facebook, even on Instagram, and like. Marian Čakarović, who is a poet from Serbia, has tried coming up with a number. Like he's really been researching it, mm-hmm. on how many people actually read poetry and follow poetry, that are not poets themselves, who do not actively write poetry themselves. He came up with a number of 240 people. I don't know about his methods, maybe he's keeping that secret. 240 people in Serbia, which has like 7.5 million inhabitants, I think, or 8 million, somewhere around that. He came up with 240 people. So I don't know about his methods, but
I don't think that would be reliable. It ought to be a census question, you know, like, do you read poetry?
Yes.
What's your ethnicity?
By the way, what's your ethnicity?
Yeah, and do you prefer novels to short stories? And
yeah.
Davor Ivankovec would also disagree with you. He hates online poetry, if I understood correctly.
I know, but there is this ambiguity. It's interesting when you say online poetry or social network poetry. Yeah. It can be understood in two ways. It can be understood like poetry as published, as presented on social media or on the internet, but it can also be understood as the kind of poetry that is shaped by social media, like people intentionally writing stuff that in Twitter-friendly or Facebook-friendly formats they can post, they can, you know, distribute that way. So yeah, and I think it's, of course, it's connected to a degree, because this idea that you're going to publish stuff on, you know, that this poetry is going to be published on the internet on some sort of your personal profile or feed before it's going to be made into a book, if it's ever going to be, is also conditioning the writing approach. There is no doubt about that. And that's a basic, like, materialistic way which we can see that the medium is connected to the processes, to the form is connected to the content. It's interwoven. You can't really separate it. I mean, there is a lot of really, really bad poetry on the internet, but I think there has always been lots of bad poetry, lots of suboptimal writing. Let's say that. I'm not convinced it's more today than There's also this idea that everybody writes now. Anybody can write. Everybody writes. I'm not sure that many more people write now, as compared to the analog age. Not compared.
Is bad poetry better than no poetry?
I don't know. It depends. When I say bad poetry, I don't really like when I moved away from the people I was writing in this essay, of which I read the introductory paragraph. I was like I ran away from this idea of being some sort of judge of taste. And I wrote literary criticism for a long time, but I'm in the sense of writing book reviews, I almost don't do it anymore because of this. I really don't like this position, of being a man of taste who comes and says what's.
A judge.
I'm talking, a judge. I don't like it. Really, and I think it's a dangerous position when you really start believing that you are a person of taste and you can distinguish what's.
Dangerous position.
You are so ginger and gentle as a critic. I follow your stuff, and if there is a shred of merit to a book, you're going to sort of highlight that, and somebody else would just.
You're the only one who ever said that. Thanks for saying it on video. Yeah, but I don't, independently from what I actually write and from what people can, what conclusions people can take away from it. I don't like this sort of position when I have some professional knowledge. I have some professional. I don't like that. So when I say bad poetry, I think what most people or most poetry readers, most people who would say is bad poetry, even they probably wouldn't say it publicly, and much less they would post it on a social network, like they would post heart or something. That's how it works. But that's a whole other story. And poetry that are really lots of poetry that let's put it this way, I personally don't find appealing at all. But I think that would be the case in most historical periods. I don't know, I don't really think. I think there's another problem actually that the people who write and publish often once you get into this position, once you get into this system, you start publishing, and then you get the benefit of the doubt for everything you write, and then publishers will. You can squeeze through, to publish everything you write.
Piggyback other stuff
to publishers, because, for example, when I listen to French-speaking or German-speaking writers, like writers from some bigger languages and literatures, talk about their work, very often they will mention some unfinished novels or even finished novels they decided to throw away, like manuscripts they never published, like having a hard drive full of books they've given up on, and much more rarely, I have to admit, I hear it from my colleagues in our region, in our language, because I think it's it's a sort of small system, small scene. Once you squeeze yourself in, you get your name out there. And of course, and also people feel this pressure to publish. I think it's pretty new. It's an old thing in the academic world, this publish or perish mantra. But I think maybe objectively is not so much as people have convinced themselves really that in the literary world is publish or perish as well. And of course, what's the quickest to write, to produce, which you always put out there. You can always put out there poetry. You can always have an output of poetry, and in the sense that you can, write a couple of lines, it doesn't have to be great, but you get visibility. And Davor Ivanpovac, whom you mentioned, who's a Croatian poet, he recently published a very blurry photo of himself on his Facebook account, and he commented fighting for visibility. But there was a comment about that. Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's hear some of your poetry, shall we?
Okay.
Now, this is my handiwork.
So we're going to do a bilingual thing here. You're going to read in Croatian, and I'm going to read in English.
And then German.
And then German. Crazy.
Simptom prvi. Kako stanem na zemlju, učini me stranom. Kako me ona dočeka, učini me strancem. Tek što se rodim na internetu, ljosnem u donji svijet. Tako iz jutra u jutro.
First symptom. The moment I set foot in a land, I make it foreign. The moment it receives me, it makes me a foreigner. The moment I'm born on the internet, I crash down into the netherworld. And so on, morning after morning.
Autobio. Tek što se rodim na internetu, ljosnem u donji svijet. Tijelo je skup sektora, svaki ganja svoju računicu, glava je šef bez autoriteta. Čučim kao slaven. Pridignem li se, ko zna šta ću zateći. Unutra talog informacija, mulj umreženog društva. U dlanovima ugravirane granice. Tako iz jutra u jutro. Možda sam odveć zaštićen. Moji poznanici s ruksacima odlaze u Mongoliju samo da ne bi morali čučati u svojoj glavi. Ja sam baziran u glavi. Emitiram brige u vasionu. Šaljem svoj skromni doprinos bjelosvjetskom spemu i pornografiji.
Autobio. The moment I'm born on the internet, I crash down into the netherworld. The body is a set of sectors, each with its own agenda. The head is a boss without authority. I squat like a Slav. If I get up, who knows what I'll find? Drags of information inside the silt of networked society. Borders engraved in the palms. And so on, morning after morning. Could be I'm overly sheltered. My acquaintances backpack to Mongolia just to avoid having to squat in their own heads. I'm head-based. I emit worry into outer space. I send out my humble contribution to the dubious pile of porn and spam.
Shall we get into the German-speaking one?
Let's do it.
Just
I'm
to,
ready.
Cut through the hegemony of the English language with
Because we can.
Thankfully, thanks to Mirza and Anja. Unutarnja politika. Kako bih pisao poeziju, zatvaram se u glavu. Svijet je već tamo, spreman za obradu, intenzivan i pun. Postoji li šansa za pjesmu? Šmugnem u svoju glavu kao svjetlo u sijalicu. Za sobom uvlačim ruke i noge, vrat i uši, ruke i noge, vrat i uši. Koliko imam ruku i nogu, vratova i ušiju, to zna samo Bog. Nadam se da ću dočekati Boga, da kroz njegovo o pogledam kao kroz špijunku. Tko zna čime se Bog zabavlja dok čeka na postojanje. Ja se zatvaram u glavu i pišem poeziju. Za sobom uvlačim ruke i noge, vrat i uši, ruke i noge, vrat i uši. Vodim unutarnju politiku. Držim fige čudu.
Innenpolitik. Zu dichten, schotte ich mich in meinem Kopf ab. Die Welt ist schon da, verarbeitungsbereit, voll und intensiv. Besteht eine Dichtungsgelegenheit, flitze ich in meinen Kopf wie Licht in die Lampe. Ich ziehe auch meine Arme und Beine, Hals und Ohren, Arme und Beine, Hals und Ohren nach innen. Genau wie viele Arme und Beine und Hälse und Ohren ich habe, weiß nur der Herrgott. Ich hoffe, ich werde den Herrgott begrüßen, durch sein O wie durch ein Schauloch blicken. Wer weiß, woran sich der Herrgott ergötzt, während er auf Existenz wartet. Ich schotte mich in meinem Kopf ab und dichte. Ich ziehe auch meine Arme und Beine, Hals und Ohren, Arme und Beine, Hals und Ohren nach innen. Meine Vision von Innenpolitik, dem Mirakel, den Daumen drücken.
One more. Republika. Je li Republika noći totalitarna ili demokratska? Zadatak je ostati okomit. Okomit na vrijeme, okomit na smrt, okomit kao drugarska kritika na drugara. Zvijezde se meškolje od korektnosti, građani od neuroza. Građani su jedni za druge uljezi. Ja sam uljezu građaninu registriranom pod mojim imenom. Iza kulisa gradilišta, to zna svaki kvartovski pas, nikakva utjeha nije u planu. Režim na režim. Očajavam. Netko je premjestio tramvajsku stanicu, odnio bankomat, pomjerio sat. Samo su frizerski saloni bili i ostali postojani.
The Republic. Is the Republic of the Night totalitarian or democratic? The task is to stay plump. Plump to time, plump to death, as plump as comradely criticism is plump to the comrade. Stars shuffle with correctness, citizens with neurosis. Passers-by intrude on one another. I am an intruder in a passerby registered under my own name. Behind the building wraps, as every neighborhood cur knows, solace is not in the plans. I blow off steam on the resume. I despair. Somebody moved the tram stop, removed the ATM, moved the clock. Only the hair salons stand fast.
Thank you. Thank you. Hvala. Dankeschön. Thanks. This is a great moment to say that actually some of the poems in English, in Serbo-Croatian, also in French, I actually like Selma Asutic,
self-translated.
Yes, like Selma Asutic, who is also going to be a guest of this program. 2 months, right?
In December. Yeah.
In December, like she writes bilingually, and really admire that. I think it's really, it can really be fascinating. Actually, when
Selma is not from this planet, you know. Selma is like.
It appears so.
Be here in December. So. You need to see that woman. She's.
Come attend everything.
Yeah. Selma,
but
December 11th.
December 11th. So yeah, actually, I mean, I didn't approach it as a self-translation. I just said, okay, I needed some poems in French, you know, to meet the deadline. And I was like, I'm going to rephrase it. I'm going to try writing it in. But I was in residence in France. I mean, I lived there for a couple of years. But you know, I grew up with French literature, especially poetry. My parents were French professors. I was like in that language, in the sense of this language of French poetry. I had it somewhere, and especially then I was on residence, so there was a local library. You know, I was frenetically borrowing books from it every day. So I was like in the language. So I said, okay, right now I'm surrounded by the language. Right now I read almost exclusively in French, tons of poetry. Let's see and rework it. I think it was okay for that occasion. I don't know now, but I don't see it as a translation. I see it like as a take, as a francophone take on the poem. Anyway, so there is this some poems in English, in German, in Serbo-Croatian, in French up there. And yeah, if you have any sort of reaction, if you have any sort of commentary, feedback, or what we call aesthetic response, you know, you want to react to something, you want to draw something, you want to write something to me, you know, I want to write this is other shit, or this is, you know, you've been, not really, but you've been frauding us with this talk, or something like that, or whichever reaction you have, you can do it upstairs. It's like an interactive poetic performance, only dislocated to, you know, like to gallery space, into an exposition format. So yeah, I try to, like, it's something we've been also experimenting with, this theater collective POKAZ. It's like with the abundance of performances and poetic performances, slam poetry and stuff, we try to, you know, like seeing what's actually, how can we actually, what other ways do we have to, enable people to come into contact with poetry, to come into some sort of interaction that is not necessarily me like getting naked here, or some throwing stuff at you, or like
Again, we repeat, not a performance.
yeah. So it's in the gallery space. Feel free to intervene if you come by. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Now would be a good time to return to this idea that sort of buttresses and holds together this whole project. The idea of being on the move, being a nomadic writer, as opposed to somebody who's like well settled in their community. And we were curious. I mean, this is something this debate has been going on in this country for like 40 years at least. Austrians are infinitely fascinated with the idea of rootlessness versus the idea of rootedness. And so we thought, Goran and I thought that we would ask every artist that we have here about how your particular lifestyle has influenced your work, as it were. Lifestyle in the sense, you moved around quite a lot.
Yeah, that was like nomadism can be a lifestyle. It can also be not a question of choice, but of nomadism is quite a broad notion in today's world. It's
Okay.
I mean, I'm also speaking from experience because I was also a refugee from among other things that sometimes in life.
That's not lifestyle. Okay.
That wasn't a lifestyle.
That's not lifestyle.
That's not a lifestyle, but it was interesting. It was really interesting. I mean, as a kid, I was even more on this, autistic spectrum, and even further away from, knowing how to appropriately behave in a given situation. So that was like, I've seen, for example, the war and the refugee experience and everything after that, moving, I finished the first 6 years of school in 5 different cities, I think.
Whoa.
But for me it was like wow, an adventure. I wasn't really able to perceive everything that was going on. But yeah, I would say I'm more of somebody. I'm more of a nomad in my own head. In the sense that I love reading about languages. Sometimes, if I'm not too lazy, studying languages as well. I'm really fascinated by language, by the materiality of language. And as a kid, recently we discussed. There's a friend of mine who's a great visual artist, Nikola Jergović, and we were discussing. He asked a couple of us, "What's a symbol you remember from your childhood? A single image, a drawing. What sort of symbol or visual cue?"
A logo or something like that.
Logo, yes. And I couldn't think of anything, but I could think of loads of words that were. I was fascinated by words and this neurotic urge to words. This mental masturbation. What does that mean? What does it? But. And that's where the question of nomadism comes in. I'm sort of, I would say I'm more of a. There's a poet named Ilhan Pečarić. He has this book collection of poetry that's called Sobni Nomad, which we could translate it as
Just a second, is it the DJ guy, Ilhan Pečarić? Did I catch the name right?
He might have been DJing. He worked.
I think
into
I know the man.
Okay. He worked a lot of stuff. He worked a lot of jobs. That's for his literary event.
I didn't know he read that.
He has a couple of poetry books, but this one is called Sobni Nomad. It's like a room nomad, my own
indoor
room.
Nomad.
Indoor nomad. Yes, perfect, great, thanks. Yeah, so more of an indoor nomad, somebody who travels a lot to reading about stuff, watching stuff, and in that sense. But of course, I'm very I'm very shaped by all these experiences of travel, sometimes accidental, sometimes accidental. I'm forced by some external factors, sometimes voluntary. In my case, it's sort of weird. There's a bit of everything. And the way I was a refugee, I didn't choose that. But in the other sense, I was quite a privileged refugee in the sense I've never lived in a camp. My parents had okay jobs wherever we moved. I was a kid, in that sense. And now, as also for my decision to moved to Zagreb some 10 years ago, also in a way that was a decision that was motivated by some goals. I also had this idea this ridiculous idea that maybe I should pursue an academic career, but then it flopped completely because I'm not the type. But I would say that was a question of choice and in a way of privilege. That I had some connections to some people, had some family, could move to, and had some history with that city where I could move. I knew some people, I had place to stay and stuff like that. But yes, I can't really imagine what my life would be like if I lived, if I had lived my life somewhere in a more conventional way, especially when it comes to childhood and the teenage years. I can't imagine what it would be like if I lived in a city, be it Sarajevo, Bihać, or I don't know, Vienna or Zagreb, or Paris or whatever city. If I just went to school there, went to year after year, I go
same friends,
same surroundings,
same,
same people.
everything.
Maybe you move neighborhoods, but same language, same framework. I often wonder what it would be like, and I had this sort of I first stumbled upon this sort of problem a long time ago when I tried writing some young adult fiction, not really young adult, but more like a fiction set in a semi-autobiographical set in my teenage years. But it had to, I was thinking about this generational idea, what's a generational context, and then I found out I don't really have a generation in the sense that I belong to, because living in different milieus and growing up, and now I'm especially talking about childhood, growing up in different countries in different languages, I had some cultural experiences that are very diverse, that stem from very different notions of what of generational backgrounds, let's put it that way. So I was when we were living in France, I discovered anime and manga, which hugely influence everything I write right now. But when we moved back here, nobody knew about that among my peers in my generation, about these weird Japanese cartoons and comics, and it was some sort of experience that had profoundly shaped me, and that I felt was generational in a way, but I had nobody in my generation to share with. People I met, it was a one-man, generational trip. And later when it came, and it's why I think with some cultural references in Croatia or in Bosnia, I connect better with some people who are 10 or 15 years younger than me. As when it comes to certain aspects of the cultural background or mass culture, such as anime, it's an example. But
How does that, if at all, influence your writing? Do you project these experiences onto your characters? Are they like you, like indoor nomads in their own heads? And if not, why not?
Not especially, no. Sometimes I think they are. Sometimes
So
not.
you don't attach any importance to that.
Well, I did in that book. It's all already, clear in this poetry collection, symptoms. I try to write about some of these experiences. Try to construct such a position of maybe a head nomad. it does influence my writing when it comes to fiction. When it comes to, for example, these stories, I think a feature I see only now in them that lots of them are quite blurry as to where exactly, when exactly they are taking place. Like it is some sort of like post-Yugoslav country. Or some are more you could say they take place in. But could the characters actually are how old they are? I think it was like really. I also didn't feel comfortable always trying to write some characters as like authentic representatives of some geographical, regional, or even ethnic or religious backgrounds. So I preferred to like try to see what's in common, to write more about some. Yeah, I wrote more about. I think the stories are more plot-driven, I'd say, than they are character-heavy. I think.
We're losing audience. We're bleeding people.
Yeah, we overstepped the boundaries. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for.
So I'm gonna let you say a few words about this one because I haven't read it and I'm not in a position to. So I'll just.
Why are you not in a position?
I've not read it yet.
I thought you were saying that you don't feel qualified to read it.
No, I don't feel qualified to say anything about it because I haven't read it. So I'm going to let you say a few words about it, and then we'll have a little Q&A.
There's this book called Naš vršnjak Dylan Dog, Our Peer Dylan Dog. It's about a cult Italian comic book, or fumetto, which is extremely popular in ex-Yugoslavia, which is called Dylan Dog, which is sort of mixture of started off as an homage to 80s trash horror fiction and also to film noir and noir fiction and hard-boiled detective fiction, and which is stumbled into the phenomenon. First and foremost in Italy and ex-Yugoslavia.
The English version did quite well.
Which one?
American, I think.
In the 90s it flopped. It like sold 15 copies. Yeah, the Dark Horse Comics translation. They did an American movie which is awful.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody told me it did
maybe
quite
recently,
well.
maybe recently, because recently in the last few years they are cooperating. Even they're trying to imitate the.
See, I'm not qualified.
They're trying to imitate the big comic book publishers in the USA, and it's a catastrophe. But the Italian editor, Benelli. But yeah, I wrote basically about lots of stuff we were talking about now because of these experiences, like growing up and finding out about the world not through real interactions with actual people, but through language and books and words and but through the lens of discovering this one comic book, I discovered that it's like I was like 6 years old, and during the war, and it was first, I was, they wouldn't let me read it because like it was too gory, too bloody. I was like fascinating all the more with it, and one of the few things I kept reading and going back to growing up, so it's about a lot of topics we were talking about through the lens of being a fan of a certain comic book. So it's not comic book criticism, not comic book. It's first and foremost, let's say, some sort of essay with also some fiction elements maybe mixed in. Yeah, that's it. There's actually a weird Austrian fan-made TV series. Yeah, Austrian, but I'm sure it's on YouTube. But I'm sure that some Yugoslav people made it in Austria. There were like 4 episodes translated into German, and they were completely obscure. So I don't know.
Good, excellent. Any questions?
I'll start. So, hi, Dinko. Melissa, could you talk about, you mentioned about the academia and how it wasn't kind of your way to go there. Could you elaborate on that? Was it like disappointing, or you just didn't feel like you fit in, or what was that? What told you, okay, I'm not for academia, I'm not fitting in?
I tried pursuing like a PhD program in Zagreb in literature, film, and there were some okay people around me. I don't have like this sort of experiences of frustrations I have at the literary scene, let's say, but I couldn't really see a sense in it in the way that it's not a form I could really handle. I had to admit to myself I can't really handle this, neither these requirements to stick to a topic for years and years, nor I can handle the form. Like I can't handle all the sources. I can't handle it seems very dishonest to me, and I say really to me as as an author, I couldn't really to try and take up this like position of objectivity and arguing for a position when I realized that everything I tried to write, I long to say, to tell an anecdote to begin with. A few years ago, a friend asked me, and yes, sometimes you can do this sort of thing in academic essays and academic texts as well, but it can't be the core of it. And yeah, that's what but I think it also has to do with my really, really, really bad attention span and inability to handle topics for a long time, and to stick to really research. I love research all over the place. I'm going to read a newspaper from the 60s. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to I hear some anecdote, and now I'm going to construct a thesis, a hypothesis. But I'm going to say, it's interesting to consider this. I think it might be, it seems to me that. But when it comes to like arguing and doing an academic paper, it falls apart.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a question about this title that you had about Dylan Dog. My question is actually, how did you come up with the title? When I see your title, naš vršnjak, Dylan Dog, somehow it comes to my mind also the other title of a book from another writer, your son, Huckleberry Finn. So it somehow, it has something like it's from the same
On the
point.
sound level, yeah.
Exactly. So how did you come with the title?
I couldn't come up with the title. I was actually so desperate as to, almost settling with calling it the book about Dylan Dog. Dylan Dog. Yeah, I was really desperate. But in the end, I tried, I was like frenetically looking for something but it's pretty fragmentary, I have to say, the book. I was looking for a way to patch it together. What's a common theme? There was this generational themes coming over, and then it settled with naš vršnjak, which would mean our peer, or our contemporary,
contemporary,
in the sense of somebody you grow up with and who's roughly your age, and we follow. So yeah, but I'm literally his contemporary. Like I was when the first episode of Dylan Dog came out in Italy. I was like 6 months old, and yeah, we like had anniversaries like in a 6 month span between the two of us. And in that sense, he was really my peer, my contemporary. But also, I looked up into, like talking to people, doing some research. Even I figured out that it's like a broader thing that lots of people feel like, and from really broad generational range in ex-Yugoslavia, like people born within, I would even say, between 1970 and 1995, roughly, which is quite, which is a quarter of a century. That feel that it's a mass culture product which has shaped them and shaped their taste, often also acted as a medium for them to discover other things in cinema, in literature, in popular culture, in music, and yeah, nothing more than that. Thanks.
Anybody else? I have one last one, just like
Go ahead.
fun facts. Fun facts. You said you were a book smeller.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question for you. What does smell better, old books or new books?
Oh, new books. Sorry.
You're a glue man.
Sorry.
Okay.
New books.
I'm a dust person, yeah.
Way too many allergies. I grew up with respiratory troubles. I don't really.
You stick to the glue.
I like glue. I like paper that smells like really like. I'm a book. I'm not
fungi.
old.
Chemicals, man.
So yeah. No.
Chemicals over fungi.
Yeah. Chemicals.
Well, beautiful. So let's finish with that. I will remind you to take some souvenirs from tonight if you liked it, to buy some books, some fresh, beautiful books. I want to thank...
You can sniff them.
You can sniff them. I want to thank Cluster Co-working Space, especially Zigutamve Photography, for welcoming us here. And that would be about it. Thank you for coming and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hvala. Dankeschön.